Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Thursday, the 6th of October, comes to you from Melbourne in Australia, my home city. So very good to be back here. I'm speaking at the IFTA conference, the International Federation of Technical Analysts conference, which is hosted every year in a different location around the world. And this year, I'm happy to say it's Melbourne. I'm going to be talking very much about what's going on in markets tomorrow. I'm the first speaker up for the conference. It's a 3-day event, and I'll be starting first thing tomorrow morning. If you go to the IFTA website, International Federation of Technical Analysts, you can actually watch this stream live tomorrow. So you can see what I'm saying. I've got 90 slides I'm rattling through and really talking about where the markets are going. And I will be talking very much about these charts, the corresponding point and figure targets to the weekly, daily and 60-minute Ichimoku charts, the long-term, medium-term and short-term view of the market. If you're a regular watcher of chartstoday.com, of course you will be aware of just how these trends work. So this is a long-term trend for the dollar. We are bullish above the cloud on the weekly and on the daily. Just short term, we are still bearish, but of course the longer term trend normally wins. So if we look at the euro, for example, we see that the trend is very much different, of course. We're seeing that weakness in the long-term trend, but the short-term we are stronger. We've got these downside targets much lower, and of course we've talked about those in our reports. Sterling hit 114 yesterday, a 2-week high, so regaining the ground that was lost with that mini budget in the UK. The reality is we're looking stronger on that short term. We've got quite a few upside targets. Whether these will be reached will be really quite key, and I'm talking about this tomorrow a lot, this idea of bullish confirmation. So whether we'll reach these targets will be really key. Of course, we've got longer term targets much lower, even to parity for sterling. So we are still in a long-term downtrend against the dollar, as are most currencies. In fact, we are just seeing that weakness creeping in. This is sterling against the euro, looking a little bit weaker here as well. We hit that sort of 115 level and we're just starting to fall away there. So sterling starting to lose that gain that it had. Bitcoin is back above $20,000, and so that's really quite key. But it's not enough to change the fact that on the long-term trends we are lower. We've got targets to 15,000, 11,000. Here the same, 15,000, 11,000. It is game over for crypto. We saw the US markets rebounding a little bit from a pretty bad week last week, but the fact is we did make that lower low, so that is bad news. And if we look at the futures today, we're flat. We're slightly down on the S&P E-mini and we're up on the NASDAQ, so a really hard call there. And in fact, markets are generally quiet. They're up a little bit. We're seeing the FTSE future up 0.15% this morning in Europe, so no big change there. Of course, it's around 9 o'clock in the morning in Europe. We are 10 hours ahead here in Melbourne, so we're going very much into the evening with markets having closed here. The DAX is actually up nearly 0.2%, so looking a little bit better there, but that break of 12,500 on the DAX was really critical. We've got back above that level. We've now got a new low just below 12,000, but the fact is we're making lower lows all the time there. So we really just do have to accept that we are seeing that. China, I'm in the Asia Pacific region, and I've been talking a lot about the Asian Pacific markets. We also saw the Chinese yuan breaking lower against the dollar, having tried to hold that support level, and so really starting to see even the Chinese currency now collapsing against the dollar, and that is having implications as well. But we're seeing here we are bearish on all 3 time frames below the cloud, heading for lower lows, not looking good for Chinese stocks. All sorts of problems you can read about in the news about China, but of course it's the chart that really counts. Taking a look here at the Indian market, this is the Sensex. It's still just struggling to break that 60,000 level. If we could, we'd activate this upside target, so that's quite key. Oz, where I am today, is fairly flat. I noticed most of my Aussie shares were just pretty flat today. I had a few that were up quite nicely, but on the whole, it's been a pretty flat day here in Australia. Taking a look at some of the commodities, we've got wheat down slightly, corn down slightly. Precious metals, we did see a really big, quite big jump in precious metals. Gold has got back above that 1700 level. That's really quite key. Not enough to really move the dial on the medium term chart. And of course, we are still below the cloud on that longer term chart, but the reality is if we could break the 2000 level, that would be really positive for gold. So that's certainly something we've got to watch. In fact, I was doing some work for a client last night going through lots of gold and silver stocks, and it's still quite hard to find really good ones. I found a few, but it's hard work. You've got to work quite hard to find them. Silver has actually crossed above the cloud. That is starting to look more interesting. We've got quite good upside targets there as well. So that's certainly one to watch. And palladium has actually been quite a good performer and maybe a good lead indicator to watch for precious metals. We're just seeing that starting to base and producing quite good results there. Yields in the US, we are seeing yields just edging higher, and of course the whole bond market is collapsing. The long-term trends over decades are starting to really break up, so that's really quite key. Looking at the energy mix now, of course energy's been such a big story in Europe over the last year or two, and so just looking at that energy mix, we're seeing here we've got quite a lot of green on the screen this morning. We did call the market mostly green in our morning report this morning. We've got Brent crude just pushing higher back to $94. If we can get above $100, of course that's going to be quite significantly bullish for Brent crude. We've got US nat gas up as well. Emissions really struggling, and that tends to be the case when we see some of the other gas and power products going up. We see emissions falling back, so that's certainly something to watch. And if we look at gas markets this morning, what TTF up 3%, NBP again we were bullish on NBP over TTF. That's up nearly 11% this morning, so really big moves there for NBP. So that's really quite key. German power, not we haven't got a paint on the screen yet this morning, but interestingly we are seeing German power sitting at 424. So that's quite key for German power. Really falling back. I did put out a report to clients in the week. And people have been asking about that report. It's in your enterprise products. If you want to get it, just go to Updata Energy Special Reports. You'll see it there. These are all the alerts coming in today. You'll see it there, and just click on it and you can read the report, as you can do with all our reports. If you want to take a trial to see these reports, you can see them for yourselves. And we go through on that report, we literally look at all the targets. There are over 20 targets there on the report, so really quite key. And you've just got to go through the report. We look at the short-term, medium-term and long-term levels, and because there's so many targets pointing to these levels, it's looking highly likely that we are going to at least fall to the first level. The long-term trend is still intact, but we are seeing the medium and shorter-term trends, of course, breaking down for power. So really quite key. We gave the levels all the way up the trend. We're now starting to talk about each progressive floor that we'll see. So don't forget to tune in to the IFTA conference tomorrow. You can see my speech there, 90 slides I'll be rattling through in 90 minutes. A lot of ground to cover, talking about where the opportunities are going to be in the coming weeks, months and year. So that's it for today here in Melbourne. Until tomorrow, happy charting, enjoy the view, see you then.